Gross, and I'm the librarian at Maple Street.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hampton. I'm a 6th grade English teacher at Maple Street as well.
And today we're sharing this video so that you can know more about the Parker Inheritance, which is a book you're going to be receiving in the mail from Kalamazoo Public Schools.
We are so excited that all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in KPS are going to receive an all-summer read this summer, The Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson. So today's purpose of our video is to kind of let you get to know a little bit more about the book and the characters, and then also give you some more background information so you know what to expect. We are also really excited because we're going to be able to talk with you and plan with you and read with you as you look forward to your reading experience this summer. So we have a Google Classroom all set up where you can join us and jump on in, and we'll include all those details in that today. Now, to get us started talking about the book, we always like to do a quick little book preview. And so Mrs. Warren Gross has a video that she's going to share in just a second where the author gives you that information and introduces the book to you. And I just wanted to take you on a little tour of the book, kind of like a mini book talk. So if you check out the cover, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, what we kind of see is that we have some buildings. Some are in gray and some are in color. And that's actually a really important detail because the book is historical fiction and also a present day mystery. And so then we also have our two main characters. We have Candace, who's our protagonist, our main character, and her friend Brandon, who helps her. And we'll talk about characters more too as the video goes on. And they're on a mission to find a hidden treasure on a summer hidden treasure adventure. So I always like to read the inside flap of a book when I'm either in the bookstore or the library. And so I'm going to kind of peel this open and read what the inside cover says before Mrs. Warren Gross shows us what Varian Johnson does to introduce the book. It says, "The letter waits in a book, in a box, in an attic, in an old house in Lambert, South Carolina. It's waiting for Candace Miller. When Candace finds a letter, she isn't sure she should read it. It's addressed to her grandmother, after all, who left Lambert in a cloud of shame. But the letter describes a young African-American woman named Siobhan Washington, an injustice that happened decades ago, a mystery enfolding the letter writer, and the fortune that awaits the person who solves the puzzle. Grandma tried and failed, but now Candace has another chance. So with the help of Brandon Jones, the quiet boy across the street, she begins to decipher the clues in the letter. The challenge will lead them deep into Lambert's history, full of ugly deeds, forgotten heroes, and one great love. And deeper into their own families with their own unspoken secrets. Can they find the fortune and fulfill the letter's promise before the answers slip into the past yet again? Let's find out some more."
Yeah, so this is Varian Johnson, who's the author, introducing the book and telling us just a little bit more about what he wrote.
Hi, my name is Varian Johnson, and I'm excited to talk to you all about The Parker Inheritance, a puzzle mystery largely inspired by my love for Ellen Raskin's The Weston Game. In this story, we follow Candace Miller and her friend Brandon as they use clues hidden in a long-forgotten letter to uncover the fortune supposedly hidden in their small town. But in addition to following Candace and Brandon's journey, the novel also weaves in the story of the Washingtons, an African-American family who fell victim to a great injustice almost 60 years before. The Parker Inheritance explores the themes of justice versus forgiveness, the impact of our perceptions and biases, and the importance of preserving the past before it slips away. This novel is also largely inspired by my hometown of Florence, South Carolina, a beautiful city with a strong, vibrant African-American community. This is a book of my heart, written over many years. I am so honored and happy to be able to share with you all now.
Now let's jump into some characters in the book so we can kind of get to know them. Also, just know that me and Mrs. Warren Gross will post these character webs on the Google Classroom, or in the Google Classroom rather, so that if you get lost, you can follow those characters throughout the course of the story and come back to the character maps if you get confused. All right, let me introduce you to some of our characters. We have Candace, who is the main character and the protagonist. Her mom's name is Ann Miller, And the grandmother on her mom's side is named Abigail Caldwell. Now, Abigail is key because if you remember from the video and from the little hint we gave you, Abigail already tried to find the treasure and uncover the town's secrets, and she failed. And so there's a direct connection here. We also have Candace's dad, Joe, who will come into play later on in the book for your reading. Now, Candace's best friend is Brandon. He is the friend from across the street, and they aren't quite sure about each other at first, but then they kind of figure each other out, and they really help each other on their mission to find the treasure in the town. Brandon has a sister named Tori. She's a little bit older, and she kind of also is a friend to Candace, and she kind of mentors her a little bit. Brandon's mom is Juanita. That's his mom. And then the grandpa who lives in this house with Brandon and Tori and Juanita is Mr. Gibbs. Brandon had a friend, Quincy, who moved away. And so you'll also hear about him because Brandon really misses his friend, Quincy. And you'll also hear about some boys who are not so nice to Brandon. So Milo and his friends, there's about 3 or 4 of them, are kind of the bullies that kind of track Brandon down and cause some conflict early on in the story. So again, our 2 main characters, Candace and Brandon, you can see them on the front of your cover when you receive your book in the mail. But also pay close attention to how these 2 characters go off on a mission to find a treasure. Now, we can't wait to get into the book, so we thought we would show you a little bit of the book as we go. And I'm just pulling up my screen. Here we go. And so Mrs. Warren Gross is going to jump in with us and start us off with chapter number 1. And then I'm going to read chapter number 2. Now, Mrs. Warren Gross, one thing that we love about this book are the short chapters that kind of go really quickly, don't we?
Super quick, short chapters. And one of the things that we have both done as we've been reading it, you know that there were a lot of characters. We already showed you some of them to keep track of. And then there's some really great clues and information because it's a mystery. So both of us, as we were reading, we have been marking and annotating. You can see I have some notes there in our books. And you can feel free to do that too. That might just help you keep track of who's who and keep track of some of the events because the chapters are very quick and the book moves very quickly. So this is the Parker Inheritance, Chapter 1. Abigail Caldwell. October 17th, 2007. Abigail Caldwell stared at the letter. The letter stared back. The paper was bright, crisp, smooth, like the pages of a new book that had yet to be cracked open. The letter, with its small, black, single-spaced words and sharp edges, spoke of a great injustice. It was written by a man who did not exist, and it promised an incredible fortune to the city of Lambert, South Carolina, if its puzzle could be solved. Abigail refolded the letter, then placed it in her purse. Dusk was beginning to set, and apart from the handful of teens playing basketball, Vickers Park was empty. She sat on a bench outside of the Enoch Washington Memorial Tennis Courts. A small crew had already removed the rusted fence surrounding the courts and was now carrying over jackhammers. A large yellow backhoe loomed in the distance. Ms. Caldwell, are you sure you want us to start tonight? The chief of maintenance asked, handing her some earmuffs. We're going to have to pay overtime, and the noise alone will... I know, she said. I'll deal with any fallout tomorrow. She couldn't risk starting the operation during daylight hours. It would draw too much attention. The chief adjusted his hard hat. Which court do you want us to start with, he asked. That one, she said, pointing to the one on the left. It sat directly across from her park bench, from what she hoped was the final clue. And it would be mighty helpful if I knew what we were looking for, he said. I agree, Odell. She rose from the bench. Maybe a chest? A crate? I don't know. But I'm sure we'll recognize it when we see it. Once the lights had been erected, the crew began jackhammering, breaking up the green tennis court into chunks. Then came the backhoe with its engine groaning through the night. Abigail stood nearby, flashlight in hand, watching as the machine scooped out pile after pile of rubble and dirt. With each dump, she reminded herself of all the clues from the letter. The photos. The money had to be here. The chief paused the backhoe after a few hours, then waved over Abigail. I'm sorry, Mrs. Caldwell, but we're not finding anything. How much deeper do you want us to go? She checked her watch. Time was passing too quickly. It would be dawn soon, and with the sunrise would come a flurry of questions and accusations. Maybe just a little deeper. She glanced at the bench. And can you have a few of your guys start jackhammering the base below that too? He followed her eyes to where she was looking. But don't tear up the bench. It's important. He frowned. But Miss Caldwell, the work order said we're only supposed to. Don't worry about that, she snapped. I signed the order and I'll handle any problems with the paperwork. Then she sighed. I'm sorry. It's just a lot's riding on this. As he went to give the new instructions to his crew, she peered into the deep, dark hole. Abigail had wagered her reputation, her job, and perhaps her overall career on a hunch. She hadn't even considered that she could be wrong. A newbie from the Lambert Trader showed up about 4 o'clock that morning, followed by more experienced reporters an hour later. And then, as the sun rose over the park's majestic oak trees, a black sedan pulled up in front of the basketball courts. Abigail was a little surprised that the mayor had arrived in person. But then again, he was up for re-election the next year. It was probably time for him to make his annual trek to the Vista Heights neighborhood. Abigail checked the small hole where the bench had been, then walked to the larger hole. She didn't know it yet, but it didn't matter what, if anything, she discovered that morning. The mayor had already suspended her. She would be forced to resign by the end of the day. The letter would remain a mystery, its secrets hidden for 10 more years, until someone came along who was brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to take the challenge again. That someone was Abigail's granddaughter. Her name was Candace Miller. Very mysterious.
Yes, I love the opening scene, Mrs. Warren Gross, because it tells like she's on the mission to find the treasure. I love that opening scene.
All right, chapter 2, bring it.
You ready for chapter 2?
I am ready.
Chapter 2. Of course, 12-year-old Candace Miller didn't know anything about a secret letter or hidden fortunes. She was just a girl trying to get through a horrible summer. She sat at the kitchen table, finishing a book she'd read twice before. Then she closed the book, walked to her room, and flopped down on the carpeted floor. Well, technically, it wasn't her room. Her real room was in her real house in Atlanta. This room, small and cramped, sat at the rear of a house unfamiliar to Candace, a house in Lambert, South Carolina, a city she had no desire to be living in. The house had belonged to her grandmother, Abigail Caldwell. What was the name of the person in the first chapter again, Mrs. Warren Gross?
The person in the first chapter in 2007 was Abigail Caldwell.
Got it.
We went back in history to 2007 when the grandmother was living in Lambert.
Mm-hmm. And now we're zooming ahead to present.
Yes.
I also noticed in my book, now in your book, the page colors changed too, didn't they?
They do. So at the beginning, when we're back in history, the page color is black. And then anytime that the book changes time period, it gives us a date, a name of a person, and the pages are gray. Mm-hmm. So when we're in present time, we've got sort of white pages, and when we're in past time, they're gray or black.
Got it. Okay, that's a good hint to know.
Yes.
This house belonged to her grandmother, Abigail Caldwell. And again, I'm on page 4. Her grandmother had been dead for 2 years, but being surrounded by all of her things had brought a dull ache back to Candace's heart. Candace's parents had been divorced for about 6 months and separated for even longer. Her mother had been trying to sell their house in Atlanta since the divorce, yet no one had shown any interest in buying their cozy bedrooms and classic kitchen. Candace's father eventually convinced her mother to let him bring in a contractor buddy to do a remodel. Instead of staying in the house or finding a nearby apartment, Candace and her mother had moved to Lambert for the summer. Candace's grandmother had only owned her house there for a few years before she moved to Atlanta, but she kept the house as a furnished rental property. It had recently become vacant or empty. It's a sign, her mom said when she'd sprung the news on Candace. This way, I won't be tempted to pop into the house every day to see how Daniel is destroying my kitchen, and we'll save a little money. Candace remembered how tightly her mother had hugged her. As much as I hate that city for what it put Mama through, we could both use a change of scenery. Candace didn't want to move, but not because of her grandmother. It was everything else happening that summer that Candace didn't want to miss. Natalie Thompson's birthday pool party, trips to the mall with Dee Dee and Courtney, summer baseball games with her dad. And their house was in the perfect location. Her friends lived in the same neighborhood. The library was down the street. Her father's apartment was only a couple of miles away. Candace had thought her father would push back against the move. She saw him every other day, sometimes more. Surely he would demand that Candace remain in Atlanta. Maybe she could even live with him for the summer. But her dad never offered to let her stay at his apartment, and she never asked. And before she knew it, she was saying her goodbyes, leaving the only home she'd ever known. Still lying on the floor, Candace ran her fingers along the thin, battered aluminum bracelet circling her wrist. The bracelet used to belong to her grandmother, but she had given it to Candace almost 5 years ago. The letters MS for Mississippi, her grandmother's home state, were engraved on the outside of the bracelet. On the inside was the word love. Candace had begun wearing it again 2 weeks ago after their move to Lambert. It just felt right. The back door opened a few moments later, and Candace left her bedroom and returned to the kitchen. Her mom stood at the sink, filling a glass with tap water. Candace was still getting used to her mom's small afro. It had barely been a month since her mother had cut off all of her hair in order to go natural. It looked good, but it was strange after the long, straight hair her mother had had all of Candace's life. Still, the big chop was about number 117 on the list of life-changing things that had happened over the past couple of years. Sorry I was gone for so long, her mother said. I lost track of time talking to Juanita across the street. What have you been up to? Candace smirked. Just rereading my books again. Walked into that one, didn't I? Her mom sighed. I promise I'll take you to the library today. She had been saying that for the past 2 days. Maybe you should check the attic, her mother continued. I bet Mama's got a whole bunch of old books up there, maybe even some puzzle books or board games. She finished her water and then placed the glass in the sink. I need to get up there as well and sort through all of Mama's stuff. She had been saying that for the past 2 years. Then her mother nodded towards Candace's wrist. I'm glad you're wearing Mama's bracelet again. It looks good on you. Her mother paused, and Candace could almost hear the echo of sadness between them. The house even seemed to smell like her grandmother, like fresh lavender. Candace's grandmother had died suddenly after her second heart attack. They hadn't had a chance to say goodbye. Maybe we should take it to the jewelry store, buff out some of those scratches. Grandma used to say that the scratches are what made it lucky. Her mother rolled her eyes. Mama wasn't really blessed in the luck department, especially when it came to Lambert. What does that mean? Candace asked. She had heard her mother make comments like that throughout the years, even when her grandmother was still alive. Grandma would always nod and counter with, just because you don't see the path doesn't mean it's not there. If Candace was nearby, she would turn to her and wink, like it was a shared secret between them. Not knowing how to respond, Candace would just smile back. Her mother took a deep breath, then sat down at the table. Since we're going to be living here for a while, there's a few things you need to know about your grandmother. She motioned for Candace to sit as well. Technically, Mama resigned from her job here, but she was really fired. It was a pretty big deal. She could have gone to jail. Candace's eyes widened. Her grandmother? A criminal? What did she do? She acted a fool, her mom muttered, almost to herself. Your grandma somehow got it in her head that there was a buried treasure hidden somewhere in the city. She talked to the mayor about it. He told her to drop it. It seemed like one big con job. But I guess she didn't let it go. Mom shook her head. She spent months doing all this research about God knows what, and then she decided to dig up one of the old tennis courts, forge city paperwork to pay a crew, and rent a backhoe, dug up all night. Candace leaned forward. She pictured her grandmother with a shovel digging up a pirate's chest full of gold. Did she find anything?
I think we know the answer, right?
Did she find know the answer. What's the answer, Mrs. Warren-Gross?
She did not find anything. We saw that in the last scene right at the beginning of chapter 1.
Yep. Nothing but dirt, she replied. Mama was lucky. The city didn't want a scandal. They agreed not to press charges if she signed a confidentiality agreement and destroyed all her research. Candace had to sit on her hands to stop from bouncing. Lambert suddenly seemed a lot more interesting. A mystery like this was more exciting than any of the logic and strategy games on her old iPod Touch. What if Grandma was right? What if there really was a hidden fortune? I can already see the gears turning in your head, her mother said. Let me stop you now. This isn't one of your computer games. There is no buried treasure. She crossed her arms. That was what, almost 10 years ago? If there really was a pile of money hidden around the city, I'm sure someone would have found it by now. But I don't think you understand. Your grandma was the first woman and the first African American to serve as city manager for Lambert. This was supposed to be a stepping stone to other things. Columbia, Greenville, Savannah. Who knows? Maybe she could have ended up running a big-time department for the city of Atlanta. But because she refused to let that one thing go, she torpedoed her career. And she made herself the laughingstock of the city, of the entire state. And it was all over the internet. Crazy Lady Caldwell, Alzheimer Abigail, the mole lady. And of course, she never got another shot at being city manager. The excitement that had been bubbling up inside Candace began to simmer down. I never knew that. No one likes to talk about their failures, especially your grandmother. She tapped the table. I know you love a good mystery, but the last thing I need is you drumming up all this old stuff about a buried treasure. The past is the past. Mama's legacy is tarnished enough. I don't want you making it worse. Just because Grandma made a mistake doesn't mean she's a failure, Candace said. Trust me, you don't know all the facts. Candace stared at her knees. Slivers of brown skin showed through the shredded fabric. Her father had been begging her to toss the jeans for almost a year, but they were more comfortable than anything else Candace owned. A mistake isn't a failure, Candace said, pulling out a loose thread. It's just an opportunity to try again. That was another one of her grandmother's sayings. I love that line, Mrs. Warren Gross.
Same. In fact, I highlighted that in my book. I like it.
It's so good. A mistake isn't a failure, Candace said, pulling out a loose thread. It's just an opportunity to try again. This was another one of her grandmother's sayings. Candace could just recite by memory the story about how her grandmother had put herself through college while raising 2 kids. She had to repeat a few classes, but she eventually graduated with a master's degree. Good Lord, what is it with you and your grandmother, she thought. She thought you walked on water and would correct anyone who said anything different. Now, here you go, doing the same for a woman who's not even here anymore. Candace tugged on another thread. It was true. Her grandmother has always been protective of Candace, but not overprotective like her dad. More like she took up for Candace when people, usually adults, said she couldn't do something. When adults said she wasn't old enough, or when they said she shouldn't do something because she was a girl. And even when Candace made a mistake, her grandmother would tell her it was just a learning experience and to keep trying. After a few moments, her mother reached across the table and took Candace's hand. Your grandmother was many things, strong, dynamic, and stubborn too, she sighed. But she also made a big mistake. Maybe that doesn't make her a failure in our eyes, but the world doesn't always see people in the way that we want.
That's so true, right?
So true. So you guys just read chapters 1 and 2 with us. If you follow along, we encourage you guys keep reading the pages that you're going to read before our next time we check in, which this video is airing on July 7th. And so the next time that we check in is July 14th. And so as soon as this video is done, you can head over to our Google Classroom and join me and Mrs. Warren Gross live, where we will be ready to talk to you about the book that you have in your hands and the book we have in ours. So I'm really excited about this. We should probably share our Google Classroom information, shouldn't we?
I think so too. I think so too. Just to be sure you can get a view, and we're gonna put all kinds of great things in the Google Classroom, some more information on scheduling and reading, and again, hope to connect with you live each week as we release a new video.
All right. On the screen, you can see our Google Classroom. Now, you know it's ours because me and Mrs. Warren Gross, our little Bitmojis are up there, and it says all middle school summer read, summer 2020. So we'll see you guys back here on July 14th at around 11:30 a.m. or a little bit after. And then we'll be with you all through the month of July on those Tuesdays at around 11:30 or a little bit after. We'll be with you live to talk about your reading, what you guys think, your opinion, all the good things that we want to talk to you about the book. So on our Google Classroom, if you look over here, we'll show you that join code in just a second, but we're going to post things like the reading schedule. And so we have a little breakdown that if you want to do small chunks every day, like 11 pages or so, you can follow that reading schedule, or maybe you just want to jump and dive right on in. So let's get that join code up on the screen. And so if I enter my Kalamazoo Public Schools email, let me slide over, there it is. If I enter my Kalamazoo Public Schools email, I can access this Google Classroom with me and Mrs. Warren Gross. So the join code is E46, lowercase I, 3, lowercase t, and a lowercase h. And again, that information is actually going to be found where? Because they don't have to have watched the video in order to join Mrs. Warren.
So you'll also receive, or should have received within your book, a little small flyer that also had our Google Classroom information. So you can join us by watching the video and getting this information, but also you might already have gotten that information and you might be a step ahead.
So overall, we're really excited to share this month and this summer with you guys, and we hope you enjoy reading the Parker Inheritance just as much as we do. And so again, we'll see you back here on Tuesdays in July at around 11:30 or so. They'll post a video. So Kalamazoo Public Schools will post a video with us giving a little lesson and hints and tips and tricks while reading. And then again, we'll be available live to talk about your reading on the Google Classroom.
Have a great day.
Bye, guys.